I'm thrilled to moderate this panel today on allyship with three wonderful business leaders. So first we have Helen Dietz, with managing director at Aspiriant. I have been trying to pronounce it. I'm doing a terrible job, but Helen, maybe you will have a chance to pronounce it for us. And then there is Maureen Edward, with VP of Equality and Inclusion at Procter & Gamble, and then Gavriella Schuster, who has her own practice but is also a board member. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us. You know, in a way, allyship is more important than ever now that we are experiencing, I think we can say it, a backlash on diversity initiative. And so it's such a pleasure to have this discussion with you. We don't have much time, so I'm going to jump into it directly. Maureen, Procter & Gamble has been long recognized as a leader in DEI initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the specific strategies that you've been implementing to foster allyship within the companies? And do you think, like me, that the current context and DEI make allyship even more important?
Yes. So thanks for having me here today. At P&G, we've worked for years to ensure equality and inclusion is actually built into our business and organizational strategies, not bolted on as something separate. And so we actually think about DEI as a strategy. It's not a program. It's not an initiative. It is a business strategy, because we believe that connecting to the business and the importance of having engaged, thriving employees to build that business that reflect the consumers is critical for everyone. And it helps the work sustain if it's strategically oriented. Now, one of the things that we do build in across all these areas is something we call our inclusion behaviors. It's part of our conversations related to talent evaluation and assessment. It's in capability building, and importantly, it's in our manager of others training as one of the frameworks. We think that being very specific about what it means to be an inclusive leader, an inclusive manager, or an inclusive colleague is critical. It's not the work of just a few people, it's the work of all of us. Inside of those behaviors are concepts like curiosity, humility, empathy, courage, and we do call out allyship. Allyship within P&G was actually born from our LGBTQ plus efforts as a concept, but now it's across the company. It's within our ERGs, it's within our teams, and as I said, within systems and processes. What we encourage people to do, a cornerstone of this work, is to start looking for patterns. From large spaces to small meetings, allyship is about seeing beyond your own eyes and finding the patterns. Who's being consistently interrupted? Are the new hires' ideas being shot down before consideration? Who's talking? Who's not? and all the way to things like, what are the types of roles people are getting coming back from a parental leave? And especially if you can look for patterns related to people who are the only one in the room, the only person of color, the only disabled person, the only dad with elder care responsibilities. It's the only way in recognizing those patterns, and this is what makes it strategic, that you can then find better systems, right? You can find what's getting in the way of equal access and opportunity and full engagement from all of our employees. And that's really what we need to thrive. It's not easy, y'all. It's not. And I will tell you, at the pace of business, it can feel like a slowdown, but it isn't. It's actually something, there's a lot of things that I believe are this way, but it is a go slow to go fast tool in your toolbox to slow down and look for those patterns. Now, finally, to your question about the world around us, right? I think it's non-negotiable to be an ally in the organization. Our people are handling so much inside and outside of the company. And I do believe it's the difference between good leaders and great leaders. You started to interrupt, so I think I'm out of time. So I'll turn it back to you.
I just wanted to tell you that I love it. And I think, I will talk about DEI strategy rather than DEI initiative. And also, I do believe, from the outside, I don't know much about Procter & Gamble, but I do believe that you have found a way to connect to diverse segment of consumers. And, in a way, in the consumer good industry, that's probably also a recipe for success, right? By leaving this value internally. Certainly. It has probably been good. So, Gavriella, you come from a different business, which is, the tech business, and you have had, leadership role in this industry. It's a sector that some people feel is struggling sometimes a little bit with industry, particularly. In fact, women are very underrepresented sometimes in the industry. Can you talk to us about what is the experience in that specific industry and what you have observed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is. I've worked in the technology industry for more than 30 years, and for most of that time, I was the only woman in the room. And I can share a lot. It's why I do the work that I do. As Maureen said, allyship and inclusion is both a systemic issue within the organization as well as an issue that each individual has the power to take control of and really create that culture of inclusion. And it is about each individual recognizing that when they are of the dominant culture of the organization or in that room, that they have a level of power and privilege, and understanding how they use that power and privilege to confer it back to those in the room that are not of that dominant culture, right? And how they empower others, how they give the floor back, how they recognize the value, how they will say, even it's in the small moments of when you call on me, you will share a bit about the background or how much you value the credibility I bring to this topic before you ask me the question, so that others really tune in and listen. Or how when if somebody interrupts me, you recognize that and and subtly bring that back to me by saying, Joe, that was very interesting, but I think Gavriella wasn't finished, so I'd love to hear what she had to say. And by doing that level of allyship behavior, we create that culture of inclusion, and we really model for others how to move in a way that doesn't create blame or shame for anyone in the room, but really just brings people back together and recognizes that there may have been a moment of an inclusion inhibitor, and how we step over that moment and bring everybody back together.
I love that because both you and Maureen mentioned being interrupted as being one of these very concrete things that happens to probably, to women in this industry, and the fact that there is something you can do about this. I love the fact that you both raise it because clearly, it is an issue. So Helen, I have to tell you, a few years ago, I went to speak at the Milken conference, and I was kind of amazed that it was basically a bunch of very tall, straight, white guys. Room, right? I found a few women, but I kind of realized that the financial industry is still very far from gender equality, and and other minorities are very underrepresented. You've been successful in this industry. I would love to hear also about what you are doing specifically in your company, Aspiriant, which I have mispronounced for the third time now, and what you're doing specifically to foster allyship.
Yes, thanks, Fabrice, and I'm really happy to be here. And it's really easy to put a blanket over the entire financial industry. And as novices, you may or may not know there's different sectors of the business and how they approach serving clients. So when you say the financial industry has traditionally had some, slow comings with DEI, I think you're right. What I do want to talk about is Aspiriant, because we are in a niche area of the industry, even though we're not a niche player. And we're in the RIA and the family office business of wealth planning. And what I want to say about that is because the firm is not built on transactions like most other brokerage bank firms. The firm is built on relationships, key relationships with our clients. Because we're a fiduciary, it's a quite different overlay. We have to adhere to a different standard. It's fiduciary and responsibility that we have to have with our team members, because the way the company is actually put together is not on an individual basis, it's on a team basis. So that organic setup sets up a different structure from the get-go. And it really is the founders and all the integrated firms that came in that provide this expression to the organization. I want to say a couple other things. And I hope that we are the lighthouse for the financial industry. DEI, we put a label on something, DEI. DEI is a state of being, right? Even before DEI came out to say, do you have a program? Do you have a strategy? DEI is how you treat others. It's how you listen. It's how you yield. It's how you advocate for someone, whatever race, religion, economic, social background that they're from. So I feel like we have been doing that without knowing we were doing that. And it's so great that now Aspiriant does have, we're always an early adopter in social causes and social causes in the organization, DEI being one of them. The other action item that we took an effort into several years ago was a Gen Now group, listening to other millennials, different generations of where your ideas would come from. You typically learn the best from the generation that's coming up behind you because they're more adept. And if you're not listening to them, you're not going to be adaptable for the future. So I feel we've done a really good job in putting a Gen Now group together. Again, this state of being, we have a learning and development area. And when you say, I think that the second part of the question is how will these efforts influence the broader financial industry? I think they're seeing where talent goes to, and people want to be seen. Your employees want to be seen beyond their career title or their paycheck. And if you can create an environment where we see you and we hear you, I think that will help us with the talent war, and the other parts of the financial industry will gravitate to getting it.
Well, I love it. I have to say that, first of all, I love the fact that you reminded us also of what is DEI, right? That behind the acronym, there is actually a desire to change the world, the workforce, and the workplace. I love that. And I agree with you that in a way, it's also a way to attract talent, right? I mean, people are really looking, what is your company stand for? What is going to be my lived experience when I work for your company? And I think those initiatives sometimes is sending a very strong message about, look, that's the company you will be joining. That's how we will treat you. So Gavriella and Maureen, coming back to the fact that you talked about one concrete thing you can do is when a woman is interrupted to bring the conversation back. Maureen, you also gave other examples in which, as an example, trying to pay attention to which ideas are being listened to and which ideas are being discarded. Is there any other concrete actions that you suggest as part of allyship in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, so I've created a framework that is very, very easy for people to remember on when they hear that moment. What is it that you do? And it is basically taking the word allies, and you advocate, you listen, you lift up others around you, you include them, you elevate them, and you sponsor them. And each of those things has a specific set of actions associated with it. The advocate is, as a verb, is what we were talking about, right? You recognize in the moment that some power has just shifted and the individual has lost attention, lost the floor for whatever reason, and you work on ways to bring it back to them. In not, again, without creating blame or shame. If somebody parrots an idea that you're only just said, you can simply shift the floor back to them by saying, Joe, I love how you're building on Gavriella's idea. Gavriella, would you mind expanding on that a little bit more for all of us, right? And what that does in the room is it shifts the energy. And most often, people are not intending to, it's an unconscious bias, right? They're not intending to slight the person who is the only, but they've kind of gone off in their own heads for something. And when the ally speaks up and shifts the attention back, then everybody, it's almost like when your name gets called out in a meeting, like you suddenly go, oh, wait, I was supposed to pay attention to that. And you come back to it. And that's why listening, active listening, listening to learn, not to respond is a key allyship action. Working on enabling and creating moments of visibility for those who may be in only, and really understanding that there may be words or things of unconscious bias, generations of phrases that have a bad intonation to different groups, and really paying attention to that, raising your own awareness and responding.
Right, I love that. And you know, when you mention that sometimes this is unconscious, it also says, well, like, don't shame the person that has developed that behavior, but try to indeed revert the conversation to the person that had the idea or that was interrupted. I think this is great. Maureen, any other tidbit you'd like to share?
The one thing I'll add, I loved everything you said, Gavriella. One thing I would add is I oftentimes talking with a group of executives that go through a conversation, and they get panicked when something is said and they don't know what to say. And I teach something that I learned from Eloisa Domingo, who is a brilliant HR, DEI, and sustainability executive. She taught it to us 12 years ago in an LGBTQ session, and it's called pocket phrases. It's when something is said and you have no idea what to say, but you know you have to stop the conversation, and it's a stall tactic. Hang on a second. You know, you're in a meeting and someone says, well, we can't give Maureen that role. She's got little kids at home. And your brain goes, that, wait a second. But you don't know what to say because the voice in the back of your head is running around panicked. You go, hey, guys, hang on. I'd like to get a pause right here because I'm not quite sure what to say, but what you just said troubled me. Can you try saying that again? And oftentimes the person will self-correct, right? But if they don't, that pause gives you time enough to let them squirm while your brain gets back online. And then you could say, because when we were talking about Joe, he's got young kids at home and we never said that was going to be a problem for his next stretching assignment. And it's a way to do it in a fun and light way. You're not blaming and shaming, which I fully agree with. But this idea, find those pocket phrases. Hang on a second. I'm not going to say this with grace because I'm a learner here. So if I say it wrong, help me, right? And it just invites people to your side of the table, which again, Gavriella, I think is what you're trying to say. Be on the same side of the table. So Eloisa Domingo, I love this concept of pocket phrases.
No,
and the practice makes perfect, right? The more you practice those phrases, the more they come to you in those moments of panic.
And we all have that moment in which we remember a business conversation in which we should have said something. And
exactly.
And you know, for years later, we're like, oh, you know, I wish I had said something. And so
I'm tired of going to bed feeling bad, right?
Yeah. No, I love this. So Helen, you have reached a pretty high level in the financial industry. We've discussed the fact that you are also in a specific part of the industry, but there is a glass ceiling for women, and a lot of women report that there is a certain point where it becomes very difficult to go higher. Have you had the experience of having allies stand up for you and sponsor you in your career, and what was this experience like?
Yes. You know, I think for allyship or allies or mentors, it's, you know, I always say it's the people you meet, it's the people you associate with. If you're not getting that, you know, read a book. But I had the fortunate experience to leave the East Coast and go to the West Coast, which tended to be a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more entrepreneurial. Silicon Valley is an area where if you come as an immigrant, you really can do anything. I mean, it really was true. And I was a New Jersey immigrant, you know, a woman New Jersey immigrant. And I would say the person that changed my life, I started in a small firm called Stanford Investment Group, founded by two men. One is Bob G. He's passed. And he had two daughters. And he treated me and gave me opportunities as he would want his daughter to have in any industry. And that person changed my life. And because of him and because of him being a champion for me, I think that gave me the ability to champion for myself and also for others. And, you know, back then in the 80s, if you had children in my firm, there was no maternity leave. You got a call from someone saying, "Are you coming back in?" So
As a Frenchman, I'm like, wow.
that was one of the first things of allyship or DEI is like healthcare, fairness for both parents, healthcare for everyone. And then, so I ended up being the CEO of that firm, and we almost had more women. We did have more women than men. And then when I merged into Aspiriant about 7 years ago, the executive team was a little bit different. It had more men than women. And that was a really different experience for me. Again, there was my boss at that time, who was male, who really took an interest in seeing my talent. That even allowed me, even though I had to prove myself again, he allowed me to express those talents. I would say fast forward 7 years today, roles are reversed. The executive team now has more than 50% culturally diverse women in the organization. The partnership is now at least 50% women, culturally diverse. And so I think when you ask me, did I have allyship? Absolutely. Did I have it along the way? Absolutely. But it came from also the people around me that I myself were mentoring. They mentored me back. And I think it's a give and take. I say this like listen to your children. They see you. And, you know, I hope that there's a trusted relationship with each generation, that they're willing to talk to you, to be candid, to rally for you, and bring you up. So
I love this.
I was fortunate about that.
I love this. And, you know, the stories of allyship are a great way for us to close this session. Helen, Gavriella, Maureen, thank you so much for sharing your stories, but also your recommendation on how to be a better ally in the workplace. And I think it's particularly important today. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Gavriella, Maureen, Fabrice, thank you.